Doubtfire. This show is presented by Malone University and Quest Prevention and Recovery Services. The world has just lost one of its greatest comedians. I'm trying not to break up here, but Robin Williams, who tragically took his own life on Monday morning in his Northern California home. Today, I have two guests here that will help us to understand what he was going through. But the world is mourning the loss of Robin Williams. Williams starred in many TV and movie films, such as Good Morning America, Mrs. Doubtfire, Birdcage, and many, many more. Some of my favorite movies, in addition to the ones I just mentioned, were Flubber and Jack, a film he did in 1996 that also starred Jennifer Lopez as his fourth grade teacher. Jennifer Lopez did express her emotions. She said the following: "Sad, sad day. My condolences to Robin's family. He brought light into every room he entered and was a true comedic genius." Throughout the show, I will be playing little clips of Robin Williams shows, movies, and interviews he did over the years. Let's welcome my guests today, Stephanie Wilson and Jeff Allen, and they are here from the Crisis Intervention and Recovery Center, and they are here to shed some light on depression and suicide. And later in the hour, I have a surprise guest who knew Robin Williams personally. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Good, thank you.
Good. So, Jeff, please, we're going to start with you. Let's go into, what is depression? What is it?
Okay. I think if we could, we just want to thank you for letting us have the opportunity to be on your show.
Well, thank you.
And to talk about this topic, both mental health, depression, and suicide. And I think when Stephanie and I were talking about this, we really wanted to take a prevention approach, just really emphasizing that help is available, and we wanted to we'll be giving resources and different interventions to help individuals. I'll go ahead and transfer it over to Stephanie regarding depression.
Okay, Michelle, one of the things that people talk about when something like this happens is why. Whether it's someone who is famous or someone that is close to us, individuals that we know, or a neighbor, family member. Why do people do this? And there is no real answer. I can't begin to understand why Mr. Williams did what he did, but some of the risk factors that come up are things that happen in people's environment. There can be job loss, financial loss. They often have something that's happened in their maybe social life or relationships, rift with friends or family members, feeling isolated. Those are things that can contribute to some risk factors that may already exist. If they have easy access to a legal means of completing suicide. And I think it's important to say that one of the things I often hear individuals say is that anything can be used if that is the person's intent. So also there can be clusters of suicide in the community. You often hear of copycat situations, and again, having someone close to you who has completed suicide is considered a risk factor as well. So other things that can be risk factors are having an existing mental health disorder like depression or bipolar disorder, a co-occurring substance abuse disorder, where someone, go ahead.
Well, my question, I've recently heard this, that they're no longer calling it manic depressive, it's bipolar. Is that, because I thought I was both. I know I'm bipolar and I know I have depression. Is it now being combined into one lump disorder?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The term now is bipolar. It was previously called manic depressive, but that is because there are the two extreme moods, the mania, and sometimes where people feel like they're on top of the world, or at times people can be feeling agitated or more aggressive when they're in that phase. And then there's also the depressed or the downside of that
Well, that's, bipolar, when people hear that, they're like, oh, that is for crazy people. I am not crazy, I'm just depressed. So now we have this new stigma of bipolar that we need to just get rid of, and, because people think you're crazy, but if you're depressed, they don't think you're crazy. So you understand that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really just more education and awareness, and I think with misbeliefs and misinterpretations, it leads to stigma, and I think stigma then results to people not engaging or accessing care. We do know that mental illness is a brain disease.
Right.
There's a plethora of information out there available, like on the NAMI website, and we have a lot of other resources we'll give you to share with everyone. I think the other thing is what Stephanie's speaking of is you look at suicide, people who complete suicide, it's multi-driven. There's multiple drivers. We always talk about, like in crisis services or crises, it's like having the glass of water, and each drop is a stressor or an event, and as the drops continue to fill that glass, it's often that one last drop that overflows the water.
Okay.
So that's kind of the thought behind things are multi-driven. There's multiple drivers. So if someone has pre-existing depression and say they experience a variety of stressful events, perhaps unemployment, relational issues, academic, legal, it just continues to compound their life experience, which also compounds their depression, and things start to become magnified.
Okay, wow. You gotta wonder, we all have stress. I know that for myself, I'm always stressed, What do you suggest that someone, if you're feeling that low and you're not on medication, do you recommend medication for something like depression or bipolar, I guess we should start calling it?
One of the things people can do is get access to psychiatric care or counseling. One of the analogies I often use with people is that medication can be a life preserver that keeps you afloat when you're in water over your head in life, and sometimes it can really feel like that. And then the counseling is like the swimming lessons where you build your skills and build your ability to cope, process through some of those stressors that maybe you've never talked about, and to be able to move forward and get somewhere. And the two paired are the ideal care path. However, sometimes picking up that phone and initiating that first cry for help takes a lot of courage, and there is still that stigma that Jeff talked about. So it's important for people to know that there is help out there. And for instance, our hotline is available 24/7. You can walk in the door at 24/7. And there are many services out there that we'll talk about later.
Well, I know from my personal experience first of all, I had no idea that I was a depressed person or, labeled that way, or bipolar. From early on, they did give me some medication about 10 years ago, and I didn't take it because I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. And then when I was drinking, I wanted to kill myself. My kids had left me, wanted to move in with their dad, and I just got my third DUI. I knew that meant jail, and I did not want to go to jail. I had been there for a second DUI for 20 days, so I knew what it was like. I was losing my townhouse. I lost my car. I had nothing. I had just given up a baby that I had to my sister to adopt. I really felt very low. I had a bottle of pills sitting in front of me, and really thought about taking them until my son came in the door unexpectedly, and he called the police. And they took me over to a hospital, and that's where they diagnosed me with bipolar. And I looked at them and I said, "You're nuts." Not me. Bipolar is this thing where people freak out. And that's not really true, is it?
No, I think getting back to talking about, folks that if they know something's wrong, like say for example, you have an individual who just can't get out of bed in the morning. They're losing interest in favorable activities, things they do, you know, social events, occupational, and things like that. They just start having thoughts of death, you know, people would be better off without me, which is a huge risk factor, which is individuals seeing themselves as a burden upon others.
Yes, I saw that in myself.
Right, and then if individuals are afraid, you know, they may say something's wrong with me, but, you know, if I tell someone, someone's gonna think I'm, quote, crazy, which we don't use the term. And I think that just kind of suppresses or makes fearful of accessing help. So it's kind of like a spiraling effect then. People are going through this disease alone, which increases depression. They start thinking something really is wrong with me, you know, who could help me? And I think it's just a spiraling, and I think that's what's so critical to think about. If someone just doesn't feel right emotionally, you know, to get out there and just to access someone to talk to, a professional, and say, hey, you know, this is what's going on for me. Do you have some feedback or ideas? And I think that's really what we're really promoting here. It's education and resources.
And that is the biggest thing for my show is, you know, I have resources. Everything is on my website. This show is to promote preventative and help you in recovery. So yeah, it is, you know, there was a lot of people out there tweeting and Todd Bridges, and whether I'm allowed to say his name on air or not, I don't know, but it's a public tweet, so I don't see why I can't, and he's famous, so nobody can sue me. But Todd Bridges came at Robin Williams through his tweets pretty darn hard. In one of his tweets, he tweeted, people are suffering in America by depression, and it seems like they've just written off as crazy people. There's so much of this. I mean, I don't care if you guys don't like what I have to say, but it's the truth, not doing enough for people with depression. When he says that, I believe that to be true, that there is not enough help out there for depression, you know, enough doctors, hospitals. Do you agree with that?
I think we can speak for Stark County. I know under the umbrella of the Mental Health Recovery Services Board of Stark County, we are rich with resources for individuals to access care. There's a number of behavioral health care providers that specialize in various areas that help individuals with you know, substance abuse disorders, mental illness, co-occurring disorders, housing, supportive employment. So we're fortunate in Stark County to have that, and with everyone working collaboratively together, you know, individuals who are seeking out and accessing care, collectively, we can develop a pretty collaborative care path for individuals. And I just keep going back to just people accessing and point of engagement and just letting people know they need some help, and that's fine, that's why we're here.
Right, I agree. Well, let's see. I'm going back to some of his tweets because he had quite a few tweets. We only have a couple minutes before we take our first break, but rest in peace, Robin Williams. I hope you found what you were looking for. There are much better ways to get help if you know someone like this to get help, if it means locking them up in a psychiatric hospital. I mean, do you believe that that is what you should be doing these days? I mean, that's what they did in the old days and gave you shock treatments.
Right. We were going to, as the show continues, we were going to actually provide some examples of individuals and how they access services through crisis, and then how we work with the individuals to give a disposition plan with them, and it's based on risk and probability of suicide through the assessment. And Stephanie's going to talk about that, and I think that will help answer that question.
Okay. You know, there is just so much out there right now about him, and if you look him up, you can spend days reading all the stuff out there. We are going to go take a break right now, and when we come back, we'll be talking more with Stephanie and Jeff. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Addiction Voices of Hope. I am your host, Michelle Beyer, heard here on WNPQ 95.9 The Light. You know, every time I hear Dead at 63, or I can't even remember the number because I'm very upset. you think that has something to do with my depression? You know, I don't know. I'm such an emotional person, but the comedian and actor that came into this world July 21st, 1951 in Chicago, in Illinois, where he lived in Illinois, a former model, his mother, his father was an executive at Ford Motor. Williams was bullied badly during his childhood for being chubby and often spent much of his time playing alone in the family's large home to avoid his tormentors. Eventually, he conquered his weight, labeled through and joining a wrestling team and track teams, and realized that he could make other children laugh in a way he gained their respect. Now, do you find that some of the people that you maybe have seen come in or that you may talk to, that bullying was part of any of it, or you know, we're going to combine that with alcohol as well, but do you see a lot of bullying and alcohol and all that coming together?
I can't say, Michelle, that I've seen specific to bullying, but people who have low self-esteem for a variety of reasons, or that their self-esteem has been damaged in some way, often can be depressed, or those things are an additional risk factor.
Okay. What do we say? Robin Williams had 3 kids. They're mostly, I think they're all adults at this point. He was married twice, still married when he had passed away. And what kind of advice would you give? Maybe you don't have advice. I don't know if that's your field or not, to their kids. You know, that have just, and they're feeling guilty because they didn't know. You know, I mean, my son, he didn't know, and he still suffers from that thought. Had I conquered it, I couldn't even imagine what my son would be thinking right now.
There are so many questions that go through the family's minds. There are all the what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
There are the feelings of guilt. If I had only picked up the phone, if I had gone and visited more often, I should have recognized the signs, or maybe there weren't any signs, but what could I have done? And people take a lot of guilt on during this time, and it's very typical to also have feelings of anger.
Mm-hmm.
Why did my loved one leave me? Feelings of abandonment. The phases of grief that we go through when someone dies of natural causes, those same stages happen when someone suicides, but it's still so very different.
And that's why I was asking, because if there's someone out there listening right now that is that close, you know, I want them to think about their family and that they really will be missed and that there is help out there. But let's talk about, you know, some more preventative measures here.
I think going on, you know, to reflect on the question about families, you know, at this time it might be nice to talk a little bit about our Survivors of Suicide support group.
Okay.
We have a Survivors of Suicide support group that's funded through our Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, and it's really for anyone, family or friends, who have lost someone who has completed suicide. And it's really talking about what Stephanie referenced about the stages of grief.
Okay.
And I think when people ask what you should say or what can you say to people who are working with families, I think what's really important is to talk with the families, the spouses or relatives, and really kind of get an idea of, you know, allow them a time to debrief and support them, and ask them and suggest different ways that they could convey and share and support their children. Because as we know, all families are so very different. Mm-hmm. And without getting to know the family and kind of teaming a intervention or a supportive plan for them, mm-hmm. I think in good faith, we need to really understand the family dynamics and what is the best approach. And I think that's why it's critical again to, you know, talk with people and let them know how how it's going on, regardless of what you might think people may interpret. And the other note is you were referencing about when people are diagnosed and are not sure what this means.
Okay.
I think this is a good, I'd like to, convey to individuals listening that at times I think we have to be self-advocates for ourselves. So if someone's seeing a mental health professional and the mental health professional is saying, you present with a diagnosis of major depression recurrent, I think it's very important for that individual to ask that individual who's rendering that diagnosis, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
What are various interventions? What are my options?
And what does that mean? I don't even know what that means.
As far as what
He was diagnosed, if you're saying you're diagnosed with what you had said.
Yeah, there's actual specific criteria for
Okay.
disorders.
Okay, and that's,
And that's based on the interview process and the
Okay.
assessment. So like I was referencing some of the criteria for major depression,
Okay.
Loss of interest in favorable activities, becoming withdrawn and isolated, uncontrollable crying spells, thoughts of suicide
As
and
I
death,
sit here and cry.
weight loss or weight gain, irritability. Those are all things that the mental health professional will be assessing during the assessments. And with that interpretation, synthesizing all the information they have and coming up with a diagnosis that they would share with the individual. Then the prescribed recommended course of treatment would follow. So that could include individual counseling services. It could be a referral to a prescriber, a nurse practitioner, or a psychiatrist. When folks just aren't functioning well at all, they're having a very hard time just taking care of day-to-day things. We call them adult daily living skills. They may be recommended that the person work with a case manager in the community.
Okay.
So there's a number of different specific services, and within those services, there's specific interventions that each mental health professional provides the person to support and promote their recovery.
Let's get inside the head, if you can. I know I can, of someone that is that depressed. I mean, Robin Williams was suffering from severe depression, and he just came out of a rehab for his drug and alcohol problems back in July, and was actually seeking help for his depression last week. Obviously, he didn't get there soon enough. I don't know what that, entails, but if you can give us an example maybe of someone that is in their darkest, state of mind, and, what they're going through. I mean, is there any way you can give us from a clinical standpoint? I mean, I know what it feels like, so I can convey my end of it in a minute, but from a clinical standpoint, what are they actually feeling? We want them to the audience to understand.
Most generally, people just want their pain to stop, and they cannot think of any other alternative than to end their life. And they have the symptoms that we've talked about. They no longer find pleasure in things that they used to enjoy. Food may not taste good. They have a weight loss, a lack of even caring about whether they shower or not, or time to their own basic needs, and that it may become more and more difficult to leave their home or even their bedroom. That phone call or that visit from a loved one may be the thing that they're holding on to that gives them just that one more day, and that may give them the next day. But if they don't receive the appropriate treatment, then that may not be enough, and they want the pain to stop. They may see how others are observing that they're not doing well, and may observe that is causing their loved ones pain, and feel that they would no longer be a burden to their loved ones if they ended their life, because they may feel that everyone would be better off.
And that's something that I thought. I thought that my kids, they don't want to live with me anyway. They want to live with their dad. I'm going to jail. I'm losing my house. I've already lost my car. I've already given up a son. Why am I here? Who cares anyway? Why not end it? And really that isn't the answer. And what I have come to find out, which is a completely different standpoint, different from the clinical version, is I found Jesus. That was my missing puzzle piece. I mean, along with drugs, of course, because in my opinion, you have this, it's a neurological disorder, isn't it? Disorder? Depression and, okay.
It's a brain disease.
So you do need medication, and I know Jesus does heal everything. I just feel that is something that is missing in a lot of our lives. But give us some more, tell us a little bit more what we need to know about this, and what we need to know.
We've already talked a little bit about stigma, but I want to add that there are people that fear that if they do reach out for help, my boss is going to find out about it. I could lose my job.
Right.
I'm going to be labeled. They're going to think that I have these problems, that I can't perform my job anymore. So if I reach out for help, people will find out. They fear I'll lose my children. CPS will come in and take them away because they'll think I'm not fit. What I encourage people to do is to reach out, because there is less stigma than there had been at one time. There are employee assistant programs now that employers often work with the individual to help them to receive the treatment that they need, and CPS will often work with families and work with parents to develop a plan for part of which would be receiving the help that they need in order to keep the family together. So I can't speak with.
I'm sorry, but we have to go to a break, and when we come back, we'll be talking a little bit more with Jeff and Stephanie. And a little bit later, we do have a caller that knows Robin Williams, and he'll be telling you about his experiences. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to a special edition of Addiction Voices of Hope, heard here on WNPQ 95.9 The Light. Today my guests are Stephanie Wilson and Jeff Allen from the Crisis Center, and in just a few minutes we will have a caller. When we left, we were talking about suicide and depression and medications and stigmas. Jeff, let's hear some statistics on this.
Okay. The information I have is from the American Association for Suicidology. It's one of our certification bodies, and what I'd like to share is some information about suicide and suicide attempts and the impact those have upon family and loved ones. The information I have is just came out in June 2014, and annually our nation has approximately 40,000 completed suicides annually. That equates to one individual completing suicide every 13.3 minutes. For adults, it's a 10th ranking cause of death and the 2nd ranking cause of death for young people. Non-fatal outcomes, those would be suicide attempts. There were nearly 1 million suicide attempts within a year.
Wow.
I think the thing to be mindful of regarding suicide attempts, I think the prevalence rate's higher because, one, they're underreported.
Okay.
An individual may attempt suicide by overdose, and it did not result in fatality, and they just seek no help.
Okay.
So things of that nature. In Stark County last year, or in 2013, Stark County had 62 reported suicide completions. So again, I really emphasize, this is preventative, and I think individuals just knowing how to access and knowing it's okay to access and encouraging others to access. We have a run, it's called Run for a New Tomorrow 5K, and it really is the suicide prevention and education, that's the mission. And one of the sayings we have is, when in doubt, reach out. And that event is held in May. And this will be our 3rd annual in 2015. But again, it's just when in doubt, reach out. If you're worried about someone, call us. We can help you navigate help for that individual. What I can do just real quickly is let individuals know how to access help, and then Stephanie can just give an example of what an individual would experience coming
Okay.
into the crisis center
Okay.
and possible options. We have a 24-hour crisis hotline, which is 330-452-6000. We're also a call center for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-TALK, which is 8255. We provide crisis intervention face-to-face services. That's an assessment and crisis intervention 24/7. We are a mobile service, so we can see and do see people in the community.
Nice.
Last year we saw around 3,200 individuals face-to-face. We do pre-hospital screenings, which is talking about a level of care model, like what is the best course of action to make sure an individual's safe and gets the care they need. We also have a crisis stabilization unit that individuals can stay for ongoing care, a detox unit, and I referenced the survivors of suicide group. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie to share what one would experience by either calling or coming in to be seen.
Thank you, Jeff. What happens when someone walks through our door is that they would get the opportunity to speak with a counselor, and they would meet with that counselor, and people need to know that it is all confidential.
Okay.
That this
That is
information
important.
is not shared, and that we work with the individual to recognize their strengths and weaknesses. We complete a lethality assessment, which means that through this process, we can identify some of those risk factors that we talked about, some of the symptoms that we've talked about previously on the show, and that we can kind of gauge or assess whether or not they would be safe to go home with possibly linkage to an outside agency. Perhaps they have insurance and they know that a certain provider accepts their insurance. We can help them get that scheduled. Or if they do not have insurance, that is not a barrier.
And do you take all insurances, like CareSource and Buckeye? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people.
Yeah, we're on a number of panels.
Okay.
We also take Medicare and Medicaid, and then we also receive funding. And this is important for individuals to know is we will see people regardless of their ability to
Awesome.
pay. And we get, again, funding from the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board to help those
Great.
individuals in Stark County.
Because there's a lot of people without medical
Right,
insurance.
that should never
Right.
be a reason that someone does not access help.
I agree.
And finances can be a reason why some people may feel that they are at the point that they're at when we talk about those multiple stressors. So that should not be a reason that people do not seek help. We want to assure individuals of that. And then once they come in and meet with the counselor and weigh out their strengths and weaknesses, what kind of protective factors that they have, do they have family at home? Do they have a job that they want to get back to? Are they future oriented? Do they have plans down the road? Are they looking forward to a major life event, or have plans to return to school, retrain for jobs? What kind of things do they have in their future? And then we can work with them based also on what their desire is. What kind of treatment do you want? What do you think the next step is? Because it's very important for people to know that this is a collaborative effort. This is not something that we do to you when you walk through our door, that it is very much a team effort that you are actively involved in. And so we help people to identify what is the best path of care. Can I go home? Or do I need some time to get linked, fast-tracked perhaps, to medication and therapy and perhaps stay at the stabilization unit? Or do I need a brief stay or extended stay in a psychiatric facility? All of which we can help facilitate and work with the individual.
Awesome. That is really great stuff. Jeff, do you have anything to add?
I think just to add, there's a lot of resources available.
Okay. I have a lot of them listed, and do you have all that information with you now?
Well, we can just reference, of course, just if you call us on a hotline 330-452-6000, we can help answer your questions further if you have them, and also accessing the website.
Okay, and as I promised, we have a caller. Minutes left. There's a couple things I would like to mention. Suicide Prevention Week is September 8th through the 14th. Then there's a World Suicide Prevention Day, which is September 10th. And Out of the Darkness Walk is September 14th at 6 p.m. at Westbrook Park. I will have all this information up on my website. I would like to thank Stephanie Wilson and Jeff Allen from the Crisis Center and Recovery Center, and Joe Vitale for his very personal story. Any final words? No.
It's just, I want people to know that they can reach out for help and that help is there, and please contact us, and we really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Well, thank you so much, because this was short notice, and I thank you both for taking the time out of your schedule to do this. You know, depression is serious. It is real. And if there is someone that you know or yourself that is depressed and you are thinking of hurting yourself or someone else, please contact the Crisis Center. Their hotline number is 330-452-6000. You can also go to my website at addictionvoicesofhope.com, and you can seek mental health specialists there. Anything that you need to know to get yourself or someone you know some help is just, it's all out there. You know, there was quite a few musical stars that are just so upset by this, and Kelly Clarkson was one, and Josh Groban, I think his name is, they were in a sitcom with Robin Williams. Anyway, they have some tweets out there. So if you want to see any of these tweets, they're all up online. Robin Williams has 3 movies coming out. Merry Friggin' Christmas would be the first one. So you have been listening to Addiction, Voices of Hope, heard here on WNPQ. I am your host, Michelle Beyer. Thank you very much for joining us this hour. I hope you've enjoyed and learned quite a bit about suicide and prevention. Nanu, Nanu.